This is Podcast Beyond at Gamescom Studio Live. I'm Brian Altano along with Max Scoville and Mitchell Saltzman, who just got a behind-the-scenes look at the upcoming FromSoft game, Elden Ring, one of the most anticipated games of 2022. Dare I say all time. Mitchell, first of all, we're extremely jealous of you.
I'm sorry.
I get that out of the way. But it's good to see you. So you saw some brand new stuff from Elden Ring. You saw somebody playing the game in front of you. It's real. It exists. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So I actually have been fortunate enough to kind of get two experiences with Elden Ring. The first time I got to talk with Hidetaka Miyazaki and just pick his brain about the game. And this time I was given basically a 15-minute presentation and then a 15-minute kind of curated gameplay walkthrough of different sections of the game. And yeah, it really is. They keep saying that it's the culmination of everything that they've learned over the course of the Dark Souls games, Sekiro, Bloodborne, etc. And yeah, it kind of combines a lot of those learnings into this gigantic open world that also has these they're called legacy dungeons, and those are kind of like the more traditional Dark Souls guided areas where there's a lot of branching paths, there's a lot of different places you can find hidden alcoves to find really cool items and weapons, and then they're punctuated by these gigantic boss fights. So yeah, I got to see the way they split up the open world is that they have open fields, which are a typical open world. You wander around there. It feels like anything can happen. There was a moment in the gameplay demonstration where I walked to a group of enemies hanging out by a bonfire. Then all of a sudden, a dragon swoops in, knocks all the enemies out. It's typical Dark Souls fashion. But then that turns into a boss fight, and you have the choice of either fighting that dragon or running the hell away. There was also a moment where you would see like a caravan of enemies, like a bunch of enemies, all guarding this like treasure carriage, and you can make the choice: do I want to engage them, or do I want to just leave them alone and come back when I'm stronger? That's kind of like the big thing that I keep coming back to, and it's one of the things that Miyazaki-san really harped on, is this idea of freedom and choice. That's the big thing that I think separates Elden Ring from their previous works. It's a game where you can really mold it in the way that you really want to play the game. There's stealth is now a really viable option. There's summons, so even if you don't want to engage with PvP, you can get enemy summons, kind of like Castlevania Symphony or the Castlevania Art of Sorrow, where you'd kill an enemy, you'd get their soul, and then you'd be able to use that soul as part of your own little arsenal of weapons. And then there's spells. So it's just a ton of customization in your options.
The summons thing is one of the coolest things you could possibly tell me personally today, because I grinded on those enemies in Area of Sorrow and all the Castlevania games forever. Which is, what's interesting about this is that you mentioned there's a lot more choice than ever before. I never really felt like the FromSoft games were lacking in that department. You have weapons you can choose from, character classes, different starting gifts and stuff like that. But it seems like they're opening that even more than ever now.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the things that I talk about. It's on top of everything else that you already have in those Dark Souls games. You now have this option of doing stealth as a viable option. You now have this option of speccing into summons. That's your main method of dealing with tough scenarios. There was a moment in the gameplay where he came up on this enemy camp where there was just a whole camp of enemies, and he summons 6 dudes, 6 PvE monsters that all fight alongside of him, and he just basically summons an army to help fight him, to fight this enemy encampment. And I actually asked him, I was like, don't you think that might make this a little bit too easy? And Kitao-san was the person that I was talking to, and he basically said we're well aware of the power of some of these summons, and we've kind of balanced it so that you get some summons much later into the game. Some you actually have to spec into the path that allows you to summon some of these more powerful ones. So it's all very calculated, it feels like.
I get the sense that would be, in some of the, it's, if you want to do arcane stuff in Bloodborne, it's usually kind of tougher at the front half of the game, but then you get super OP towards the end. I get the sense that that'd be the same deal with summons. Now, you talked about how there's legacy dungeons. Is this sort of is this Would you compare this to like sort of Breath of the Wild in that there's the sort of which didn't have dungeons, but like there's different beasts that you can approach in different order. Like you can just can you just run in any direction and pick a dungeon and see what happens? Or
I will say I think there are probably there's a little bit of Breath of the Wild in it because you have the spirit steed and there's a lot of verticality in Breath of the Wild, right? And I think in Elden Ring, verticality is one of the big things that they're going for in the open world. There's actually little platforms that you can go to while you're on your spirit steed, and you can leap on them, and it'll just send you flying into the air so you can leap onto the tops of cliffs.
That's awesome. That feels like something that was they're piggybacking off of Sekiro because that was one of the first games that made you go like, oh, I can go up there. That's cool.
Yeah, and also the steed can double jump. It doesn't seem like it takes fall damage, so there seems to be a lot of freedom in the exploration of the open field. What's different than Breath of the Wild? Breath of the Wild, literally, you can go anywhere at any time. You can tackle any of the 4 beasts at any time. I was told that there is an order in Elden Ring. Like there are certain legacy dungeons that you might find earlier than you can get, then you can actually explore them because you'll need something that you might get from one of the other legacy dungeons in order to, get through. Right. But also one of the things I want to make clear, there's a map in this game, which there's a map that you can bring up by pressing a button. You can actually collect map fragments to build out the map that you have. And it's one of the coolest, most stylish maps I've ever seen. It's illustrated. It's like a cartographer in the actual world actually, hand drew it. And there's like illustrations all over the place. The way you actually get, the way you actually mark places, you have a set of markers that you can put on the map. So you can put a marker for there's an NPC over here. You put a marker that says there's a really tough enemy over here. There's a dungeon entrance over here. So it's not like one of those Ubisoft things where you're just bombarded with icons and waypoints. It's really just a matter of whatever you put on the map is what it shows.
What's interesting to me is that, we're talking about all this sort of flexibility in terms of play styles, your, different spirits that you can bring in and stuff like that. And I think some people are going to look at that and kind of be like, oh, you can make the game super easy if you stack a bunch of stuff on each other. But I also see it as there's going to be a ton of pro players that look at this as a challenge to go I'm going to bring one of the more obtuse spirits with me to one of the hardest areas in the game and publish a let's play of me just dominating. That's just one really cool thing about the long tail on the Souls games and FromSoft games in general is watching people beat them with Guitar Hero controllers and they're butt naked and they're fighting with just their fists. A lot of fun stuff happens here. Now, obviously, you talked about that impromptu boss fight that happened. Were there any other bosses you got to check out as part of this preview?
Yeah. So one of the other things about the open field is that like I said, it really feels like anything can happen. There's actually a field boss that is just kind of hanging out in one of the locations where if you get close enough, it'll just trigger a boss fight. There's no fog door. There's just a really tough enemy that's guarding this spot. And then, as I said, the legacy dungeons are capped off by a really big boss fight. These legacy dungeons are basically the culmination of one of the 6 areas of the games. And so there's demigods at each of the endpoints of these legacy dungeons. Actually, I don't know if you've been watching the B-roll, but the boss fight that I did see was one of the ones that's featured in this trailer. It's the guy with the 50,000 hands and 5 different weapons, and his arm transforms into a dragon head. So that was the boss fight that I got to see. And it seemed like the most soulsiest Souls boss I've ever seen. He has really big sweeping attacks with his axe. He has a big ground pound. Eventually, it seems like there's a second form where his arm transforms into that dragon head, which gives him this unblockable grab that he just grabs you with the dragon head and just spews fire while you're inside its mouth. It's very, very cool.
Now, Mitchell, one last thing before we go, very, very, very quick, and I know you don't have the definitive answer here, but do you think FromSoft will be able to stick to the January 21st release date on this one?
Oh, God, don't ask me that. I will be so heartbroken if they don't, but also I'll understand.
Right. But it looked like it's ready, right? Or it's getting there.
It looks like it's ready. It looks like it's in a form that is not only playable, but in a playable form that I really, really, really want to play right now. God, so I think, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Well, I will in the play meantime, this video game.
Yes, we need this game immediately. Elden Ring, January 21st. Mitchell, you'll have a preview going up. We can read. I cannot wait for this game. We're all very, very excited for it. In the meantime, we've still got tons more Gamescom Studio ahead, including brand new looks at some really cool games like Aeon Drive, Arcadegeddon, Kanga, and tons more. So stick around because Gamescom Studio will be right back after this. And until then, beyond.